an IQ. We need even
structure.
EQ. We need emotional. We need somebody who understands how the staff feel, who's going to make sure they have lunch, who's going to make sure. So roles started evolving that changed the look of the head of the organization. And as companies grew bigger, there was also the need for increased accountability. Companies came from domestic to, subsistence a bit, and then to bigger businesses. And then eventually we started having companies that were like public companies.
Yes.
That belonged to the public. A circle here, a circle there. If you hear the story of Standard Bank in South Africa, how it started, it's just families of boys putting money together, and it grows and grows and grows. And the more it grows, the higher the need for accountability.
And now they are a listed company, so their accountability is
much higher. So what happens to this, that they realize that this accountability is not only of the lower people. It's not only the CEO who should be accountable. But if the CEO is accountable and the CEO becomes a mess, where do we go? So they started having advisors and things like that. And eventually, that's when we started having boards. So we said, now corporate governance is that system of checks and balances that protects the business from the human beings in it.
That's interesting.
Because a company or a business is an entity, is an individual in the law.
It's different from the actual human beings.
But the poor entity cannot commit a crime. And yet it's governed by people who can commit crimes.
The crimes.
So we want to protect this baby from these humans, while also still getting the wisdom these humans can contribute to the business. So that's corporate governance. And you find that as they evolve, the evolution of corporate governance has been as people find out, the accountability levels are high for the CEO, but then the directors, they said, okay, let's bring in maybe the elders or retired people who are shareholders. They realize that shareholders who are on the board were beginning to interfere with board directions.
Because they have an interest.
Exactly, because they have an interest. Then they also said, okay, let's have some management on the board. Let them participate. Democracy. Let them participate in their own governance.
Yes.
Then they said, but also these management people are going to start making remuneration decisions
that favor them.
And yet, at the end of the day, corporate governance wants the key, as lawyers, the Children's Act says everything should be
in the interest of the child.
Thank you. Fantastic lawyer, Brian. So in the best interest of the child. So corporate governance is all about the best interest of the company.
And allow me to pause you right there, because you've given us a wonderful history of how corporate governance has evolved over the years, starting from small family businesses. And I wanted to pick right there.
Yeah.
Because the evolution has been happening from a zillion years to now companies being listed on the stock exchange. But let's assume that someone out there has a local family business of 1, 2, 3 members, maybe 5. Is there a place for corporate governance in that business, and how would they relate with the need to sustain and to grow the business?
Yes. So now the issue of what you want to do with your business depends on what you look at as your bottom line. Why? What is the why? I like Simon Sinek's book of Start With Why. What is the why of your business? And we know that the why of any business is to make a profit. The why of any business is to make a sustainable profit that is going to keep the shareholder or the investor in a certain cushy situation financially, right?
Yes.
So if you want sustained growth, you need to make sure that your company outlives the founders, that your company survives anything happening to the founders or the shareholders or even the directors. That's why you should have policy. And the policy should be like a constitution, That's why at the beginning of our constitution, we say we the people, hoping that this constitution should be stronger than anybody else in the country. So the memorandum of association or articles of association
Yes.
will determine what will happen in case anything happens to the owners. That's the first thing, continuity. The second thing is that you want, I told you that we mentioned it, the profit element. How will this remain profitable? The company has to be trusted. So how shall it be trusted? We have to separate it from the persona of the founders.
Yes.
Because you see, Nabasa Law right now, I have a whole team that runs it. If I was to make it about me, when I'm not there, no customer will come.
True.
And businesses long ago used to be about the person, but then people die. We all have an expiry date, but also people get tired, people retire, people get married. I mean, if you go on a honeymoon, you might forget, you might come back and have a baby and forget about the business. So we are saying we need to separate it from the persona. The law already says if a company is a company, it's an individual in the law. But there's certain things we have to do for this baby to grow, to outgrow you and I. So these are the things we do. The policies, you put policies in place, you hire staff that are not necessarily invested in the business, but then you make sure you also have people that are advising the business but don't have a stake in the business. And those for us now have become sort of the godmothers, the godparents of the child. This child is growing up. You want the child to grow up as a Christian, but they know that parents will be biased. They'll slap too much sometimes. They'll mislead. They might teach bad habits. So I say, let's get some serious people in the community to bring up the child in case daddy and mommy go wrong. And these are the godparents. So these are the non-executive directors. That's why, in LEAD where I work, we award the non-executive directors because they have no stake, they have no salary, they have no shares, but they are in the company guiding
and ensuring that
making
it's run.
sure that this constitution you created for this company is lived for. And that the bottom line is still the focus, the best interest of the. So let me tell you, even if you have a pancake stall, you need to know where is your capital coming from. That's the shareholder.
The investor.
Who is making the pancake? That's the staff and management. Yeah.
Yes.
Who is deciding how big the business should be? Now that's the board. Who's deciding the strategic direction of the business? Now corporate governance is how all those controls and directions are done. And this has been entrusted in the board, in the boardroom. So much as corporate governance starts from down, you cannot have the board of the pancake business without the pancakes themselves. The visionary, the person who invested the money, the capital has to be there, everything. But the board exists to meet the shareholders' interest. Remember that the shareholder had a purpose, the why.
Yes.
But the shareholder sometimes gets distorted
Distracted.
from the why. So the board is the one to keep reminding him using his document. You signed a marriage certificate. I am the matron. Please, I know I keep going to marriage, family,
Which is wonderful.
So the godparents, the matron, these are stakeholders who don't have a stake really, but they have a say and they keep you going straight. So every company, every business needs those guides, needs a board that has executive directors. These executive directors are the ones who have a stake, who will keep saying our money, who will keep saying the staff need this. Then we need also the godparents, the non-executive directors, who are going to say, yes, you people are thinking about your shareholding, but you need to remember that the community. So that's how it has evolved. That at the beginning it was just profit, profit, profit.
Yes.
Then it said no, the welfare of the staff. Then it said no. So the well-being of the corporate governance of any country, of any company will be judged according to
Its
the
impact.
welfare of the staff, the profit. But now people are saying, no. You cannot be a responsible company if you're not responsible for the community in which you serve, from which you benefit. So now the community has become a huge stakeholder.
Yeah.
So sometimes
So the
companies
why-
will even get someone from the community to just, be on
sit
the
on the
board or
board.
something. So as we grow, as companies profit and grow bigger, we keep saying, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Indeed.
Corporate governance has kept building and building and increasing. That's why you hear King 4 principles from the beginning, building and building on these principles to increase the duties, whether fiduciary or legal, of the people that are in charge of this company, to make sure that it meets the aspirations of the stakeholders, who are many, and the shareholder, most importantly.
Wow.
Sorry, I've said many things.
I know that's a wealth of information, and right, I kept wanting to interrupt you, but then you're speaking with such passion. And when you speak about family, and you speak about marriages, and you speak about godparents, I had actually never seen it that way. That the godparents are the non-executive directors of
the child. Yeah.
Or that the matron and the best man
Are the non-executive
directors of the marriage.
Yeah, they're very important.
And sometimes we have people playing these roles even as mentors, as the reason Fat Talks exists is to listen to people like you and those that have gone beyond, to understand what is it that you can advise me, what is it that you can advise this business. If the business of Brian wants to grow and be sustainable, I'm now asking myself, who is my non-executive director guiding me on the direction that I ought to take as a man, as a father, as a friend?
Who's the board chairman?
Who is the board chairman? Am I accountable to anyone?
Yeah.
That's just, thank you. I think you've really demystified what corporate governance is, and it's basically, if I could have a take home, it's having some sort of accountability, some sort of structure, some sort of why that keeps you on a certain direction.
Yeah, if I may be allowed to be a bit more technical.
All right.
I'm going to give you 3 definitions.
Okay. Take us away.
You don't need to write them down.
Okay.
But the International Finance Corporation, IFC, says that corporate governance is a mechanism through which boards and directors are able to direct, monitor, and supervise the conduct and operation of the company and its management in a way that ensures appropriate levels of authority, accountability, stewardship, leadership, direction, and control. That's a lot. It's a mouthful. But then there are people who like technical definitions. So the International Association of Insurance Supervisors says that corporate governance is the means by which members of the board and senior management are held accountable and responsible for their actions. Remember that in the law has so many things that hold management
accountable
and staff, especially the lower people, accountable. But usually companies don't have things that will hold the head accountable, and the fish starts rotting from the head, as we say in Africa. So the system by which corporations are directed, controlled, and held to account is the definition that Corporate Governance Institute of Uganda, where I started out, as a member, defines it. It's the system by which companies are directed, controlled, and held to account. So that would be maybe a more technical or simpler definition. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for really demystifying what corporate governance is. Now, if we're to go back to the topic for those that are our viewers and our listeners on the X Talks, I keep forgetting and calling it Twitter. So these are Fat Talks on X space. Yes. So please, I hope you are following. We started by demystifying what corporate governance is, and the topic today is corporate governance, the harbinger of business development and growth. More to simplify it, corporate governance, the one that announces how to grow your business or how to have business sustainability. Now, Fiona, I wanted us to transition into the evolution. I know you mentioned how corporate governance has been evolving from requiring one step of accountability to another, to requiring a board, to requiring non-executive directors, to requiring... I wanted you to sort of demystify what are the current trends, especially in the region, within Africa or Uganda or East Africa, because I know that you, as the CEO of the League of East African Directors, you're having oversight on how businesses across East Africa are growing or how they are evolving to maintain a certain standard of corporate governance. What could you say are some of the major trends in the evolution of businesses across East Africa and Africa at large?
So one of the major things that has happened is that there was a point at which when they had Europe experienced the pain of not respecting corporate governance around the time of the Great Depression.
Yes.
There are a lot of companies collapsing and things happening. And these were things that were not companies that were big. There was a lot of financial crisis across the West. And this is when they woke up and said, we need certain principles to save companies, to sustain them beyond, their owners and anybody else that might want to mess them up. But in Africa, when we took independence and we took over government institutions that had been given to us by the protectorates and what, we pretty much sort of had a party across the continent. If you see what happens there, because yes, at first we had some white men running these companies, and then they gave them over to us, and they gave them to young, educated, hungry African men who are willing, and women who are willing to do well. But as these men and women grew older, and maybe there was no training of people to replace them properly. So the people who replaced them, and you see this around the 70s, I'm now talking about the countries that didn't have turmoil like Uganda.
Yes.
Around the 70s, you see that the older guys from the 50s, from the 60s where we got independence, are now phased out. And we have young people taking over and a bit of materialism cropping in. Now, the materialism was baby boomers, our parents. Now, when it comes in, now we see public corporations across Africa collapsing.
Yes.
And we see the IMF promoting privatization around the early 90s. Now, the problem came to East Africa. I mean, we were not immune either. And around between 93 and I think 97, you see banks across East Africa, 15 banks in Uganda, I think, and across East Africa, banks had started to mushroom. In a very unbanked environment, individuals owned banks and local individuals, which was big news for us. These were family-owned banks, and there's a whole banking crisis that happened between 93 and 97. And you saw what happened. People lost money, people lost, and this was also happening everywhere else. So that is why we got a lot of stringent corporate governance principles, and the law started changing, evolving. In 2012, for instance, Uganda changed its corporate governance, its Companies Act.
Yes, the Companies
to
Act.
increase the liability of directors, to say that, if you remember the case of Jamwa, congratulations, he just got out of,
on presidential pardon.
Yes. Justice Katusi, now we speak as lawyers,
yes,
stated that the role of a director is no longer judged according to the skill, according to the measure of what a reasonable man would do. It is now a measure of skill. What does that mean? Board directors can no longer hide under
a reasonable man.
A reasonable man would do this. I mean, it made sense.
No.
I'll give you an example.
The expectation is higher.
Right now, as we speak, if you go on Google, and allow me to just, I don't like to get facts wrong, because Brian will have my head. I'm just giving you. So we all know Elon Musk, right?
Yes, we do.
So we just had a crisis where his salary of 56 billion, a pay deal. There's a pay deal of $56 billion. I mean, it's Elon Musk. I'm sure the board director said, you deserve it. You're always doing the wonderful things, etc., etc.
Yes.
But court has just overturned this, because it says a judge in the U.S. of Delaware annulled this pay deal awarded to Elon Musk by the electric car company Tesla 2018. I mean, the things that Elon Musk has done for Tesla, he would deserve it, right? But everybody's saying that board that decided this is not only, according to Justice Katusi, is not only reasonable men. These days, boards are obligated to get professionals. So one of the trends that's happening is the increased liability on directors. And the test, Justice Katusi that time said, the test now is that of skill.
Skill.
So you have a duty of skill as a director. So that is why Bank of Uganda last year, released regulations that say all boards have to have audit committees that are chaired by somebody who has audit qualification. Now that raises the standard of that audit committee.
Yes.
That means that when the auditor goes to these people, he's going to his seniors. So it's no longer, management misadvised us. We can no longer have that excuse. The second thing is we saw the Insurance Regulatory Authority. Now they've said that the audit committee of the board should have non-executive directors who are not members of the board, which is very strange, right? It sort of creates a board within a board, but they are trying to remove conflict of interest, to remove aspects that will weaken the judgment.
And to have stronger checks and balances.
Yeah. So another trend in the law is that the law has increasingly defined the role of the director. Duties of the directors used to be fiduciary in nature, as in you owed, by virtue of your responsibility, you owed this duty to the company. And it was fiduciary.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe fiduciary. Can you help me?
More like duty of care.
An obligation
yes.
that nobody will really arrest you for. But now we have legal duties. And one of those legal duties is the duty of skill. The duty to know the law. To know the law, the principles. You know, we always say ignorance of the law is not
a defense.
Exactly, it's not a defense. So you have many duties and so the law has increased those. The third thing the law has done is it has defined and made certain committees compulsory. As we increase, as I told you, now we're even being told ESG, which is environment, social responsibility, and governance. Now is a big thing that people are creating ESG committees of the board because they realize, we need to have a godfather who cares about the environment, a godfather who cares about what we're doing with the society. And a godfather who cares about the governance
of the company.
Before they used to think, the audit committee will look into governance or the risk committee. Now we have risk. Risk is now a compulsory in our act. In the Financial Institutions Act and in the Insurance Regulatory Authority, you'll see that insurance companies, banks, financial institutions, it's now compulsory to have a risk committee of the board. So these are the trends. And this is because they're increasingly seeing the use of corporate governance. They're increasingly also redefining what it should look like. Now, to the realities. Sorry, I'm going to say. Martha Stewart, I'm hoping my listeners know who Martha Stewart is.
We are hoping.
There's a certain generation that might not know her. She's a famous person and she owned her company and she did so well with her cooking and everything that her company was listed on the stock exchange. She was a triple billionaire. But, one time when she was given insider information that, your stock is about to drop in price, she cloned about $1 million in stock and I think sold it. You use your insider information, which is fraud, conflict of interest. And when she did that, she was put away for 20 years. Martha Stewart. Of course, she thrived in prison and she probably got more famous, but some of us might not because Luzira is not in any way an American prison. Yes. So we've seen, Jamwa, we've seen cases where the person doesn't look like they really committed a crime. I mean, by our definition, they're not in the
by layman's standards.
But the crimes are created in the Companies Act. The crimes are created in the anti-corruption, anti-money laundering. So another trend we've seen is money laundering. We've seen that every time you give companies loopholes, the human beings in the companies are going to teach this baby bad manners. So that's why anti-money laundering now is saying URSB, Uganda Registration Services Bureau, we need the beneficial ownership of every person to be declared. They want to know who benefits from this company directly. So that when that person is a minister in parliament and gives that company a contract, we know
that they have favored themselves.
Exactly. So corporate governance, I keep saying that corporate governance is the highest standard of regulatory compliance. And corporate governance is the ninth one. And now let me go to Jesus in the Bible. When Jesus came, he said, you have the law. And the law says you shall not sleep with another man's wife.
Yes.
That is adultery.
You shall not commit adultery.
But he said, for me, do you know what I've done? When I come here, I am telling you, you shall not think on it. If you think on it, it is
already
adultery. Corporate governance is saying, do not think on it.
It actually says, if you look at another man lustfully, then you have already committed adultery in the eyes of the Lord.
So corporate governance is saying, if you are in the room when your relative comes in for an interview, get out.
Recuse yourself.
The law might say, declare it. And then the board might say, sit with us. It's okay, we trust you. But corporate governance will question why you stayed in the room. So it's a highest moral standard for companies, for governance. And they
so you said it's the highest moral standard for any business.
Yes. But it's also the highest standard of regulatory compliance. Because if you follow the principles of corporate governance, you will not fall into the regulatory net that will catch you with the penal code and arrest warrants and things like that.
I know, and I just want to pause us there and remind us that those that are with us on Smart 24 TV and on X, please do share with us your experience in corporate governance. What have you done? Have you done any of these trends? Have you, for example, do you have someone responsible for risk on your board or in your company, someone looking out for the auditing, someone that is looking out for the environmental impact, the social impact, and the governance as a whole? Fiona has been telling us some of, the trends that are happening. So if you are keen on growing your business or making sure that it outlives you, then you want to be already thinking about these things, or you already want to do them and run them in your company. So share with us your experiences as Fiona tells us more and more about these trends in East Africa.
I'll give you an example. When we talk about the board and the burden that the law now puts on the board, MTN Nigeria, there was the time that we were supposed to register all SIM cards. It was a regulatory requirement. But at first, when the regulators raised it, it looked like a suggestion. But they were not suggesting it. They said those that are not by this time will be fined.
Yes.
So MTN Nigeria did not comply with that. What that did to MTN Nigeria was that people in South Africa were fired because the regulator gave MTN Nigeria such a hefty fine that it impacted the financial, probably, well-being of people down south in the head office. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
They used to say when Britain sneezes, Europe catches a cold, right? So the smallest person in your company that messes with compliance can cause a huge problem. Now imagine the head. That's why corporate governance puts such a high standard of compliance on the board. Now, another example I want to give is Nairobi Airport.
Yes.
For many, many years, Nairobi Airport had been paying insurance premiums, and it was a policy. They were actually paying premiums. But they had gone through so many, upgrades and things like that. But they didn't need to do upgrades on the financial side for the insurance premiums to protect the airport, because they said, what are the chances that the fire will happen? I mean, it has never happened. And these decisions were being taken to the board by management, and board would say, yes, absolutely, it makes sense. I mean, fiscal,
financial policy.
Yeah, you're serious. You're protecting the finances of the institution. But the day that Nairobi Airport got flooded, they discovered that Nairobi Airport was so underinsured that the reinsurer could not touch it. And this was now going to be a burden on the government of Kenya. People were fired, I think all the way up to the ministry. So we need to understand that corporate governance is something we need to use as a driver for business growth, as opposed to something we should look at as a burden. So even if you have a small company, when you're starting your small company and you tell Brian, I can't afford legal services, but guide me in these documents right now, maybe I'll give you a share or something, in the near future. It will save you from a lot of grief. If you're going to get a loan of 100 million and you don't have a lawyer look at it, or an accountant to tell you whether you'll be able to meet the taxes or the obligations according to your business plan, you are going to end up, already you're practicing corporate governance by making sure that the right people guide you in the right way.
I know. And just the example you gave of Nairobi Airport, I think is a perfect example of
stewardship. Actually,
of stewardship.
Yeah, corporate governance is stewardship.
Yes, and of the risk to business sustainability and business growth, which is what we want to focus on. And you can see that if Nairobi Airport catches a fire, it could run out of business.
Yeah. And that affects the country. I mean,
that affects the country, that affects trade, that affects financing, that affects everyone. The people that are employed all through the airport, the people that are rushing through Nairobi, which is a busy hub. But then the growth, because the insurer now doesn't want to touch it.
Let me tell you, every small business wants one thing:
growth,
capital injection,
money. Chintu chimu twagala chi.
And we like OPM. What is OPM? Other people's money.
Other people's
money. And everybody will tell you that to run a business, you should use other people's money, meaning get credit, get financial support, get investors. There is no investor who's going to touch your business with a 10-foot pole if they don't trust it. Corporate governance is a driver of trust. If you go there and say, my business has a board of directors, they'll say, oh, good. Who's the board of directors? Then you say, it's Brian Kambaho, sorry. They'll say, okay, Brian Kambaho, we know him, he's a serious lawyer. In their head, automatically, you're already aligned legally.
Yes.
That's what it's doing. So corporate governance organizations use these boards and directors also, one, to build their brand, two, people know that board directors take their reputation on these organizations. So they're going to protect the organization because it's tied to its reputation.
And speaking of that, very recently, just last week alone, the Justice of the Commercial Court, His Lordship, Stephen Mubiru, passed judgment that really sent people speaking and airways all across the country. And he touched on a very important aspect of the duty of the lawyer to do due diligence, to advise. It's no longer simple advice. It's no longer, so it's very similar to what you're saying. You are on the board. It's your duty to advise the company. You may take it lightly, but you could later be held liable for the effect of your advice or the lack of it.
But also having those systems, having a board of directors, having management that is separate, having the three arms of government, you know what I mean? Having the staff, having the shareholders separate, and having these things accounting to each other, and you have a proper policy of direction and control, will attract business. If you've watched Shark Tank?
Yes.
That business where these angel investors come into a room and you're supposed to sell them. The first thing they ask you, what's your management strategy? What's your structure like? And the second thing they negotiate for is control.
They want a stake in the business.
Always want a stake in a business. I'm going to put in my capital, and the third thing they're going to tell you is the reason I'm giving you such little money for many of your shares is that I bring my name to the business.
Fantastic.
So because of that, you're going to realize that if you're a small business person and you want to grow, you need it. If you want to trade, if you want to get another company to buy into you, you need to clean house, and corporate governance is one sure way to do it.
Well, Fiona, later, and I know we'll be taking a break in a minute.
Yeah.
You've kept mentioning that you need a big name, or you need a name, or the fact that someone is on the board. Then
not a name, a fat. Let me say it, fat person.
A fat person, one that is faithful, available, and teachable. I am a fat fellow, you people. So please look no further. But I will ask you later. What does it take to actually choose some of these board members, or to choose a diligent corporate governance structure that ensures business sustainability? And I'm asking this for the business owners, or the people that are running businesses, or even law firms. I know people may be running law firms like home kiosks or small shops, and we want them to now transition to running them like a proper business.
Yeah.
And I hope you can give us insight on that. But then you also mentioned that, I think, yes, I read somewhere that you are the director at East African Business Council. So
a director, yeah.
Yes, you are a board director. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us briefly about that before we break off. And then I'll be asking you two important questions, as is the tradition here in the FAT Talks.
Well, the East African Business Council is the private sector body that negotiates for the East African private sector.
Yes.
And yes, I sit on the board. Now, you mentioned something very important. I don't know if you want us to go into it now, or you want to go into the break.
No, I think let's do the break now, and then when we return, we shall get to hear these exciting things. So please stay with us on Twitter, and those that are with us on Smart24.
Smart24, driving business.